Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Mug to Mug with Erin. I'm Erin, and this is my mug. Here's my other mug. I've got my uh, ocean mug today with my seagulls. And I have another mug in the studio today. Miss Amanda Schaefer is here with us. Hey, Amanda.
Hi, how are you? I don't have my coffee mug, so you only get this mug.
It's okay. We'll take your mug. um, so Amanda is here as part of our conversations in the series, Where is Jesus When? And the thought or the premise behind the series is that I'm asking friends, new and old, to tell about times and situations in their lives where they really felt God's presence. I
Mhm.
love talking about how Jesus is our everyday Emmanuel. And sometimes it's just more powerful to hear about people's stories in real time. And so Amanda's going to talk with us today. Amanda is in what state are you in?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So we're like
Mhm.
in different time zones. But thankfully, because of technology, we can like sit here together. Oh, and there's my cat.
Hello.
All right. And Prince loves the camera up here. He always makes here, you can look at the camera. Look at the camera. Anyway, Amanda is in Pennsylvania, a whole different time zone, but I'm thankful for technology that allows us to get to visit as if we're
Mhm.
sitting on my front porch uh, in this crazy April weather. But Amanda, I'm gonna let you get started. Tell us about a time, or I mean, I know you have more than one, when
Mm.
you were present in your life.
Well, it is. It's really hard to pick, especially having just worked on a book where I looked back from a childhood all the way up till now. I realized how many of those times I have. And I think the reason why is because I really am able to now look back and know who God is now. I can look back and see where he was, where I might have missed him. But the one that comes to mind that is very different, very unusual, is someone who's a podcaster. I hear lots and lots of God's children stories, and I haven't heard this one yet. So that's the one I'm feeling called to share.
Great.
So, I have 2 children. I've been married twice. I've been divorced twice, unfortunately. I did not know God when I got married. I did not ask God who to marry. I did not ask his opinion in any way. Yet he still gave me these beautiful children. So I've gotta say God proves himself all of the time, in the ways that he reacts, to our lives. But I was in my 2nd marriage, and we got married again without me knowing Christ yet. I grew up going to church, but it only met the rules and the regulations. I never knew about actual possibility of having a relationship. I actually thought as a little kid, because a lot of things that had happened to me, that God was kind of mean and had turned away. Um, and so I'm in this marriage that I second one that I didn't ask God about. And about a week before, my now second husband started showing signs of having bipolar disorder and started self-medicating and became a pretty horrible alcoholic, is when I met Jesus. Now, what makes this story so incredible is, and I'll tell you a little bit about me meeting him, but I found out right after I had my encounter that in the same house, this was not a church, at the same time in a different room, my daughter was meeting Jesus too. And so we celebrate together every single year. You know, we went from mother and daughter to sisters in Christ. We celebrate together, and it's just amazing. It's just an amazing thing that he would give me that gift. He would give us that gift. So at the time, things were really not good. I think right before he started to show signs of having bipolar disorder, he was already just a little bit not invested in the way he had been when we first got married. And I was very lost. I remember thinking, there has to be more to life than this. Now, because of traumas and things that had happened when I was younger, I had not dealt with a lot of those things. And so I know I had gone through bouts of depression. I know I had gone through times where I just was really cut off and numb, kind of pushed everything down like a trash compactor over the years. And, it was getting ready to explode. And I just remember feeling, even, with my kids, I think was when I most came alive. I felt most fulfilled and most like who I think I was supposed to be, who I feel like now. But in other areas, I just didn't. I had friends. I had started going to church for my kids, but I still hadn't met Jesus. And so we had this. I don't think we have enough time to get into the real pre-story, but we had this gathering for my daughter's 13th birthday, which included being at my mom's house, which everyone thought was haunted, and using a Ouija board. Not something you would meet me now and think that I would have anything to do, but these are things I grew up with as being okay, even though we went to church, you know? Somehow these things infiltrated my little life. And so, we had this party, and because of that, I think, um, got really off kilter in looking to the results of that time as exciting, as that was the thing. Because life, is this all there is to life? But yeah, here was this exciting thing. We're getting answers to questions from somewhere other than right in front of us, right? And so, and God took that, and he spoke to me in a moment where, I think I would have placated myself like every other time he was speaking to me, because God never stops talking, and said, "Oh, that's okay. You're a good person." But I had this moment about a week after that where I was at home and I'm having a thought, and it's really hard to articulate. So I try to make it look like a movie for anyone I'm explaining it to. So I have this thought, and at first I think, that's okay. That's a good thought. And then for 1 second, I realized, no, it's not. It's a greedy, selfish thought. And when I did that, it was as if all of everything about me just kind of turned into this alignment of realizing reality. And if you were looking at this on a big screen, everything would have gone dark. And I was at the bottom of some kind of pit. It was so wide I couldn't touch anything to climb up it, but it was really, really dark. And I had the feeling that I was cut off from everything. And
Mm.
I remember kind of settling into that realization, like, what is happening? Where am I? And I looked up, and way at the top was this tiny little hole that seemed like it started getting closer, of light, just pure light. And as I'm realizing, hey, I'm not the person I thought I was, it's as if all of the seeds that had been planted when I wasn't paying attention at church, that I still had heard the word of God, which never comes back without accomplishing what he sent it for to do, as if all those dormant seeds started to shoot down roots and started to grow, because suddenly I knew I needed God. So here on this light, I see coming across something, and I'm looking, and it was the face of Jesus. Jesus was looking down into this pit, and somehow he came down in. I remember feeling as if I was picked up and put on his shoulder. And I remember coming up, what I really remember was a visceral feeling, as if this was really happening, of my feet being solidly put on the ground. I remember that I didn't have shoes on. I remember that the ground was warm from the sun, and I remember the brightness of the daylight. So it was this stark, stark, cut off darkness. And now here I am with my feet planted firmly on the ground right next to Jesus. And I knew who he was. He did not say a word, but he instead leaned in and put his arm around me, and we walked off together. Now, as we walked, he finally did say, and whenever I tell this story, I want to cry, and I may. He looked
Yeah.
at me right in the eye, and he said, "Welcome home, daughter. I have been waiting so long for you to come home."
Mm.
And that's all he had to say. We just walked off together, and everything from that moment on was different. I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning to read a Bible that I went out and bought for the first time. I didn't have any in my house, got a study Bible. I was praying, I was worshiping, I was learning everything. I was just voraciously going through the word, learning everything that I could. And obviously, if you know me now or you've watched this long, that has not gone away. All I do is talk about Jesus, and I am filled with peace and joy and all of these things that he brought that were missing in my life. And so, when people talk about a Damascus road, a conversion, that was me. That was me. I made fun of Christians. I made, light of it being a real thing. My only thoughts really were that that was just a bunch of rules. And yet here I met in this amazing moment at a time where I was doing things that were really not biblical. That's what I think. I think God took it and turned it and said, okay, you're looking for that. I'm going to give you a reality check on what that takes you to. And then
Mm.
I'm going to give you the choice. Are you going to agree with me? All without, as God does, without really needing to articulate it. He offered me this choice, and this time I took it. Not really understanding, but knowing deep in my heart I was not good and I needed him. And had a little bit of battle after that. Actually, I don't think the enemy was super happy. I think he thought he had me tied up with a bow and I was all set. But I had God with me at that time to be able to make it through that. And then to know that my daughter, who came to me a couple hours later, and I wasn't quite sure how to articulate to her what had happened to me, but I, as a mom, wanted to talk to her. So we kind of came to each other. And as we worked our way through the conversation, realized that each of us had had our own very special encounter. I never felt so connected to anyone in my life. It is a special bond that we have. And God has taken our lives and just transformed them. She is an amazing psychotherapist who's getting her doctorate, who helps people every single day and loves the Lord. My son loves the Lord. I love the Lord. And all we do is try to make heaven more crowded. We are just trying to reach people every day with the truth of the goodness of who God is, of his ability, of his actual loving kindness, and how he is not like people and he is faithful and all of those good things. So that's the shortest I could do it. How'd I do?
I love it. I love it. I didn't want it to be short. I love,
Oh, okay. It's a very detailed kind of experience that transpired over time. So,
yes, I love
yeah.
that. I love how you explain it. I felt like I was right there, you know, with you in that. And and with the like if you had told me about it the next day, I would have
Mhm,
been kind of like, okay, we'll see. But you got
mm.
years behind you where that really did, that was the Lord. It wasn't just a weird thing that happened. It was the Lord reaching you as only He can.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because there were people in my family. There's a lot of people in my family who do not believe. The remnant was my mom and dad, my kids, and I. And I think they thought that was going to happen, and they cannot get their minds around the fact that, by the world's standards, I'm kind of doing okay with this. I have a global podcast. I have books. This is my sixth book coming out. I have opportunities to speak, so in the worldly view of success, my idea of success is don't remember me, remember Jesus, that I could just point to God. But they can't quite make sense of why is this thing working. You didn't necessarily go to school for it, get trained for it, set out to do it, and yet here you are. So I love how God does that. And yeah, but if it had just been one day, but yet we're going on in May, it will be 24 years in Christ and I'll be 61 years old. So do the math. In a very short amount of time, he has healed layer after layer of things. He has strengthened me. He has shown me more of who he is. He has shown me more of who I am and who I was meant to be. He's taken all the things off that were spoken over me that were never meant to be there. And I've gotten to see what he purposefully deposited in me. And that's the thing I would love to say to anyone who's listening or watching is that God intentionally deposited things in you that he wants you to use for his kingdom to delight you and to connect with others. And then he'll even take all of these things that are not really meant to happen. They happen because we live in a fallen world, and he'll take them and he'll work it all together. And he'll, just like kintsugi, which is on the cover of my new book, it's a Japanese golden joinery. So instead of throwing a broken vessel of pottery away, they'll put it back together with gold. And so that, I think, is God's specialty. He'll take everything and work it back together into something new that's really beautiful, even more beautiful in the broken places. It's more valuable, it's more beautiful, it's stronger in the broken places, and it's now usable to be filled and poured out from for him. And so the way he takes our lives and puts them back together again is an example to everyone we meet that there is hope and he is really who he says he is.
Mm. Yes. 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 When you were talking, I was thinking about how it would be so okay. In one view, it would be so much easier if he just didn't, if there was no brokenness.
Hmm.
But and one day there will be no brokenness, and that's called,
Amen.
you know, and
Yeah.
it will be one day, but in his way that he works, he allows, I mean, there's the brokenness,
Hmm.
but he works beauty where even in situations, I heard people say
Hmm.
they thank God for the brokenness because it brought them to him in a way that would not have happened before.
That's
So
right.
life would be so much neater and not so messy without the brokenness. But sometimes messy grace is just beautiful.
It
And
is.
so when you're talking about I love that method of what's it called?
Kintsugi.
Suji. I always
Hmm.
get the syllables mixed up. So, uh, but it's beautiful, and it's a beautiful picture of what God does in us.
Hmm.
No matter how broken that we think we are, and how,
Hmm.
the enemy of our soul is whispering into our ears that God could never use us, and it's
Hmm.
late. And you're like,
Yeah.
I'm 61. It is never too late.
Yeah. It's so funny because I'm so young at heart and so filled with joy. That is what I hear from people, such an encourager. Like that's how people perceive me. And it's how I feel every year. Like when I turned 60, I said it's pronounced 16. I have to come up with something for 61, 60 fun, maybe. I don't know. I just don't feel like I look on the outside. I feel like I'm more my years of being born again, right? So I would go with more than I'm going to be 24 than I'm going to be 61.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I like that because it says we're being renewed daily.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so you you are inside you're 24.
That's right. Maybe even younger. And one of the things I wanted to say when you were talking about the brokenness and how it can, bring us and God uses it for good. I'm 100% in agreement. And immediately I had the story of, the plants and then the weeds that were planted by the enemy in my mind when you were talking about it. It's like God isn't going to pull up the good stuff because the bad stuff is there. He didn't want it there. He made everything good, right? But he gave us choice. And that choice is what makes him just and fair and loving. And when he created the angels, he gave them choice too. When they fell, though Jesus didn't come to save them, they were not family, right? Which is one of the other reasons I think the enemy is a little bit angry because he doesn't get a way back. But when God created Adam and Eve, he created them in his image with his breath, with his hands, right? He formed them as sons and daughters, as family. And so then he had this plan, right? To send his son back to bring us all home. And that's why I cried so much when Jesus looked at me and just, welcomed me home because when he said it, I knew he had been pursuing me. I just had never really understood that it was possible.
Mm, wow. And you were going under the assumption that he's the rule maker and rule enforcer.
Yeah,
It
yeah, mhm,
is
yeah,
another tactic of the enemy.
I know,
Any way to keep us from seeing God's love and tenderness toward us, he will.
mhm,
And then you come along and just bust all that wide open. And I love
yeah,
it.
yeah,
I love it. Oh, so if I just happen to have a listener out there or
mhm,
a viewer that feels like um, God's so far away and that they're like, I can't imagine that vision of him picking me up,
mhm,
but they do know something's missing. What would you
mhm.
say to encourage them or what would you do?
Well, I would say a couple of things. The first thing that comes to mind is that the doorknob is not on his side, it's on our side, right? So that we are the ones that can actually choose to believe. So his word says that when we draw near to him, he draws near to us. His word says that Jesus came and died for us to make atonement while we were sinning, right? So everything about his word says that he's already provided everything for us that we need to get back to him, that we are adopted and chosen, we are loved, we are all of these wonderful things. And nowadays you don't even have to go in your Bible, you can go on Google and just ask some of these questions. The second thing that I would say is do that. Test him, draw near, ask him, draw close, God, show me, tell me, do something. God will meet you in that. And I can guarantee that I can say that because I know God's character. I know he's just waiting for you to even be open. I think that when we understand that God is always speaking, that's another thing. So it might not be in the Bible, it might not be at church, it might be out in creation. Everything in his creation, everything that he has made has his DNA all over it. The way that it works, the way that it looks. I mean, think about how beautiful it is right now. Certain things like a sunrise or a sunset or a flower blooming or a baby being born. Okay, think about that. That's the fallen state. That was after everything fell. Can you imagine how beautiful it was before that?
Mhm.
Okay, this is the God who wants you to come home. There's another story, if you don't know it, I just want to share. So there's oftentimes where we talk about God being a father figure, and you might not have a good earthly father figure, and that might be what's in the way. This is just what God's putting on my heart right now. So I think this is for someone. And there's this story about two sons who have a father. One of them stays with the dad and the other one asks for his inheritance early. Well, that is not something that you did. You got your inheritance after the father would die, but he asked and the father gave it to him. And so this son takes off and he leaves the village and he goes somewhere else and he pretty much blows all the money, all the inheritance on having a good time, and a famine comes. And here he is and he's hungry and he doesn't have anything that he needs, and he's even kind of longing to eat what some of the pigs have that he sees, and he thinks to himself, well, my dad's a fair man, and if I went back and asked to be one of his workers, maybe he would let me do that, right? So that's what the son's thinking. So as he's making his way back, I want to tell you what the father was doing. So picture, and I used to picture this as him standing all by himself in this landscape, but he's not. This is a representation of a father of the time the Bible was written, standing in a village with all of his neighbors who knew what his son did and knew he was gone, standing there every day looking on the horizon for his son to come home, wanting more than anything else for his son to return, not wanting to hold anything against him, just wanting him to be back with him. So here he is, he's thinking, he's looking, he's waiting, and then one day he sees him. You know what he does? I'm a digger of words, so I look into traditions and things that were happening at the time of the Bible. He lifts up his robes. Men at that time, that was the most disgraceful thing you could do. You would never lift up your robes, right? So he lifts up his robes so he can run to his son. Okay.
Mhm.
So think about the Holy Father in heaven lifting up his holy robes to run when you finally are like, God, I think I want to come home. Okay. He lifts up his robes and he runs. Now, part of the reason that this man in the example in the Bible runs is because he wants to get there to him quickly. But I looked into some of the other traditions, and one of the things that they used to do is they had this ceremony. If somebody had a child who got their inheritance and the father had passed away, in this case he was alive, they got the inheritance and they go off and they want to come back to the village. They had this thing that they would do. It was a little ceremony where they, sounds really weird, but this is what they did. They would cook these beans until they got burnt, and a big crock of burnt beans, and they would stand with the person who wants to come back in, and they would break the big container, and they would say no, and they would reject him forever. He could never come back home. Okay. Never come back home. And so Number one, the father's trying to get to him right away because he's been looking and he's been waiting and he just wants to hug him. But number two, he wants to get there before his neighbors because he's standing here in the village and they all see him too. So he runs to him and he gives him a covering, he gives him a cloak, he gives him a signet ring, that's the family ring, and he puts shoes on his feet. And then he comes back and he says, we're going to have a party. And he kills the fatted calf and he celebrates because his son who is lost has come home. That is the God who I'm asking you to just give him a try. He's already standing on the horizon looking for you. He's standing there waiting, hoping with everything in his heart that you'll choose him, that you'll choose home, and you'll come back.
I love that. Yeah. And that when we finally do stop running away from God and run toward Him, there's, I don't know, the things that we were afraid of that He would change in our lives, don't, all the fears melt away. So,
Yeah, and one of the things about studying like that particular place in the Bible is that I think like the more time you spend with the God, more he'll show you. Like there are ways of understanding the Bible that are just intellectual, and then there's heart ways of knowing. And so when he reveals things to you, he knows I'm somebody that's a digger. He knows I'm going to go look up what was going on, and he gets excited when I do that, so that he can show me that layer of lifting the robes, right? Of of getting there ahead of all of the other villagers, of claiming him before they could reject him. All of those things, that's his heart. And so there's layer after layer, and no matter how long we spend with him, I'm going to do a little aside because he's dropping this in my mind. We're never going to see all of him. So there are two little stories about these older women they just are so refreshing to me, right? So we think like we're going to be in eternity with God if we accept him. We're going to be in eternity, and we're supposed to always be worshiping. And um, this one woman had said, God, I sometimes have trouble after 5 minutes, really being focused on worshiping you, and we're going to be with you for eternity. And like, I'm really worried because I want to worship you, but like, I think I'm gonna not be able. I'm gonna run out of things, and I'm worried about it. And he revealed to her that when she's with him in eternity, that he's gonna show her a new thing to worship. And then he'll show her another new thing, and that will go on forever. The other story is a personal story. A friend of my mom's, when I became a believer, I was really on fire, as I still am. And she knew this woman who was about 85. And she said, I just think you two need to meet. She is just like you. And so we had lunch together, and we were talking about a place in the Bible where it talks about the seraphim and the cherubim are reverently flying around God's throne, and they're saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. And this dear woman said to me, I was thinking, God is so big that even in eternity, even the angels have been with them all this time, and they've been with them a really long time, but they still haven't seen everything. And as they're flying around his throne, what if instead of being so reverent, what if they were saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God? They're seeing more of him, more of him, more of him. And I just love that, because that is a childlike, awe and wonder approach of thinking about how amazingly big and wonderful God is, and that we're never going to stop seeing new things, and we're never going to stop experiencing new qualities of how good he is.
I love that. I love it. I love that. So one thing I love about following you on social media, Amanda, is that that sentiment right there comes through in your posts and your even the fun silly things you do, all that, it comes through. That joy in the Lord comes through. And that is so refreshing because there's so much on the, in social media that's not refreshing. And so I appreciate the way that you are just yourself, and you're, just a reflection of the Lord, no matter what you're doing or where you are.
Well,
And
thank you. That that makes me happy. I don't know how other people perceive me. I can't be other than who I am, but that is how I feel on the inside. So that's lovely to hear. And we're supposed to be an aroma of Christ in the world, right? We're supposed to remind people of who God is. And I think it's really important that Christians like let people know like it's not boring, it's an adventure, it's an abundant life,
Right.
you know?
Right.
I always thought it was boring when I was little. It just seemed like that's what those rules and those regulations were. But actually living with God and walking in what he gives you step by step, it's exciting.
Yes.
It's really, really an amazing life.
I love that. So I know you said you had 6 books.
This will
Well,
be the sixth one.
this will be your 6th one. Yay.
Mhm.
Well, tell us about this one because
Okay.
I'm excited about this one.
I am too. So this is called Holy Plot Twists. God is still writing your story. And I coined that phrase while interviewing people on my podcast over the past 4 years. Every time we would find these places in their story, because on my podcast, we start in your childhood and work all the way up to what you're doing now. I have some people that are famous, some people that don't even have an Instagram. I want to share all the stories. But I started to notice these really great moments where God would go in and do his work. And I started calling them that. So when I got the opportunity to do this book, I very much felt like God said that's the title. But I think the second part of it that he's still writing the story is so important, right? That there are still more of those plot twists to come. So I had been doing a lot at the time where I felt like God wanted me to do this, and what I was discerning from him was that he was happy that I was putting out all these stories every week on the podcast, but it wasn't enough, fast enough. He wanted to reach more people. I often use this image. I feel like God is trying to cast a net over the world. Um, and he uses our stories to reach other people. Yours reaches people mine won't. Mine reaches people yours won't. Where they're all unique, and that there are holes in the net, and so he wants more people feeling confident and bold about sharing their story. There are people who don't share their story because they don't understand it, or they're missing places where God was. They haven't really taken time to look back and see or listen. And there are other people who just maybe think it's not dramatic enough, or not every story is valuable. Every story is necessary, and it's a gift from God. So the way that this book works is in an effort to show people that that's true. I have a very not Christian beginning, as you can tell from listening to this. So I go from my childhood up until my present with stories that show these twists. I also do a lot of referencing back and forth between my personal story to biblical stories. And so it's a kind of a free flow. If you don't know the Bible, you could still understand what the biblical story is about. So I want to reach everybody. And if you do know the Bible, it would add an extra layer from hearing about what was happening in my life. So I do that in the first part of the book. The second part of the book is an interactive journal, and it's made up of questions that I've learned to ask over this time of being a podcast host. And God has just given me this series of questions, and starting at the beginning and moving your way through, that really help people open up and see times that they might have missed that God was there, times that they didn't understand that He is now going to use for their purpose to reach other people with hope, times that they need healing, they need to have felt like they were seen and heard. He's going to sit with you. So my hope is this. I've put this together. I've been vulnerable. I've put my stuff out there that he asked me to do. I've put the questions together, is that someone will read my story, see who I am now, read who I was, and see that God really can transform a life, and then be brave enough to sit down with God and go through the journaling section and see what God has to say for them. And I even say in the introduction, if when you're done, you want to come on the podcast and share your story with more people, come on, get a hold of me. So that's it's pretty much like the podcast in a book form. So I think God wanted me to reach more people, and I'm looking forward to doing some small gatherings in people's homes and really connecting with people and being able to send them home with that, to spend time with God, because I know He'll meet them.
Nice. So when is this book coming out?
It will be, I'm waiting right now for the pre-sale link, but it will be available for sale on April 29th.
Great. Hey. And this will probably be this will view after the 20, I mean, this will air after the 29th. So
Mhm.
um, people can just where would they go to find it?
Well, I don't know if you put any kind of show notes in your with your so we'll put a link there, but I have a website, acupofgratitude.org. So you can find anything there. You can find the podcast there, books there. I have my author pages on there. Everything that I do is linked there, all social media. So I would say go there.
Okay, well, good. On your podcast, so A Cup of Gratitude.
Mhm.
Uh, your podcast is, I love listening to it when I'm on like I'm driving. I live out in the country, so everywhere is like at least a 20-minute drive. And so I love listening to your podcast during those times because it's so encouraging and uplifting, and it's fun to hear people's stories and to see, where God has been working in their life. So I definitely would recommend if you need something fresh to listen to podcast wise, check out A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda because she's just
Thank you.
a podcast. You feel like you're sitting with her.
I'm the luckiest girl, and yeah, I said girl because I am 24 years young, remember? I'm the luckiest girl that there is because it's so encouraging, and I know you know that when you have these conversations with people, and every story's different, and that's what God showed me. It was His idea to start in people's childhood and come up, until the present. And so I've had this kind of side ministry of people who don't necessarily read the Bible or go to church, but they'll listen to the stories because they are really interesting, and you can tell we know each other, you can tell it's real, and God is always the same in every story, and they're starting to notice that. So it's been a really cool thing, and I just love getting to do it. It's really refreshing.
Well, fine. Well, good. And it comes through. The refreshing comes through, and the fun, the fact that you love doing it, just comes right through. Well, Amanda, do you have anything else you'd like to say to our viewers today?
Well, first of all, just thanks for listening. I love getting these opportunities to be on the other side of the microphone and talk a little bit about what God did in my life. That really is the only thing that I can offer back to Him that He doesn't already own. He owns all the cattle on all the hill. He's in charge of everything. But because He gave us choice, the only thing we can offer back to Him is our life. And in Romans, it talks about offering our lives to Him like a living sacrifice, and that's really what I want to do. I honestly want more people to know what I have found, which is freedom and healing and peace. And He brings all of that. And so, what I would say is this again, hearkening back to when we talked about if maybe you don't feel like He's really that, you're disconnected, or you have something difficult that you're going through. If you would just dare yourself. What do you have to lose of calling out to God and asking Him? I guarantee you, He has always been the same, and He is never gonna change, and He will answer your call. So that's what I would say.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today and visiting with me. I have loved our conversation. It's been
Oh,
so,
thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
and thank you for joining us on Mug to Mug with Erin. We'll see you next time. All right. On the right button.